In this video, I'll show you how to make this Montessori-style hammer peg toy that your kids are absolutely gonna love. At least I know mine did. Underneath the surface, a simple mechanical lever system lifts the pegs up and down as you hammer on the opposite side. It's a basic design, but tons of fun. This is an extremely beginner-friendly CNC project, only requiring 2 pieces of wood, 2 CNC bits, and simple toolpaths like pockets and contours. If you want to build one yourself, I'll link the CNC files along with a detailed PDF instruction manual down in the video description. Now let's go cut some wood. As with all CNC projects, the first thing we need to do is make sure that our stock is square and flat, so that's what you'll see me doing here on the table saw, using material that I've purchased from a local big box store because I'm barely a real woodworker. The first of our 2 pieces is a 3/4 inch thick piece of maple cut to 22 inches by 10 inches, which will make up the top, the legs, some spacers, and some base components for the pegs. Up next, we have a 1 inch thick piece of teak that will make up the levers, some larger spacers, as well as the head of our hammer. In addition, you'll also need a few pieces of 3/4 inch dowel for the pegs and the shaft of the hammer, as well as 1 piece of 3/8 inch dowel for the shaft that holds the levers on the bottom. And yes, the jig you see me using here on my bandsaw is custom, but I would still consider it a prototype because it doesn't work quite perfectly yet. And with everything cut, we can throw component number 1 onto the CNC machine to finally start cutting some wood. For this project, I decided to use double-sided tape to hold all of our components down to the machine because I didn't add any tabs to the contour cuts that will cut all the way through our workpiece. I usually choose this work holding method when there are smaller parts like there are in this case, where tabs would just be annoying to sand. That being said, I still add clamps around the edges for some extra holding pressure. Once I'm sure nothing is going to move anywhere, I can set my 0 and get ready to start carving all of my toolpaths, which I'll show you right now. I'm using Carbide Create Pro, but you can use any CNC CAD program that allows you to import SVG files, which I think is all of them. The only 2 bits you'll need for this project are a 1/4 inch downcut bit and an 1/8 inch downcut bit, which I'm sure most of you already have in your tool library, but if you don't, I'll post some affiliate links down in the video description, which helps support the channel. Because the spacers on the bottom left are only 1/4 inch thick and the peg bottoms on the right side are 1/2 inch thick, I need to pocket out the areas above them to make them the correct thickness. I like to use this method because it saves me from having to mill a bunch of different pieces of wood down to size and having to carve them separately. Once those 2 large pockets are out of the way, I can continue with the 1/4 inch downcut bit to pocket out some of the smaller holes where our different sized dowels will fit. The next step is to switch to the 1/8 inch downcut bit so we can pocket out the dog bones in the corner of the mortises where our legs will later go during the assembly process. I also used it to pocket out some smaller diameter holes as well as finish out the component by using contours to cut out all of our components. And it was at this point during the carve process where I realized I made my first mistake. Only 2 of the 4 spacers on the bottom left are going to be used. I made 2 extra because I figured they were small and fragile, and I thought I might break some. The mistake I made, however, is the fact that I only made 6 of the end caps for the pegs on the right side when there should have been 8. So once this component was carved, I did have to go back and make 2 more of those pieces, but don't worry, the final SVG files that I'll post down below will be fixed and everything will be good to go. I don't know how I overlooked that. I guess I can't really count. The next mistake I made was that when I took my pieces off the machine, not all of them cut all the way through, and that's just because my stock must have been just a hair thicker than 3/4 inch. That's no big deal for me because I do have a drum sander which allows me to just shave off material until it's exactly 3/4 inch, and it actually makes the components a lot easier to sand because there's no more sticky residue from the double-sided tape. From there, it's just a matter of sanding everything to your liking before moving on to the 1 inch thick component where we can cut out the rest of our parts. Alright, so in the footage here, you're going to see me use the 1/8 inch downcut bit to cut out this piece, but I want you to keep in mind that this is 1 inch thick stock, so you can only do this if you have a long reach 1/8 inch bit. If you don't, you could use the 1/4 inch bit here. I was just lazy and I didn't switch them out from the previous carve. Essentially, we're just doing the same exact thing as the first component with pockets and contours. There's nothing complicated about it, so I guess I'll just skip over this section because you don't need to watch me carve it. We can just move on to starting to assemble this thing. Clearly I did a lot more sanding off camera, but this is what everything should look like once it's all prepped. I will say I did use my router table to round over the edges on the main top as well as the legs, because I think that adds a nice finishing touch. And speaking of finishing touches, let's move on to showing you another mistake I made while trying to glue together the end caps and dowels. These end caps are designed to keep the peg in place between the main top and the levers, and should go together easily if I had done enough sanding to the dowels. Basically, I used a mallet to force them into place, and on one of them it was slightly too tight and it cracked the cap. It's not a huge deal since this is such a simple toy, but I do have some wood filler that I think I can hide my mistake with. After shoving it down the cracks and letting it dry, I sanded it down, and I think it's pretty unnoticeable, especially for such a simple toy. I am going to use a dark color, in this case purple, to try to hide it even further though. If you haven't seen this stain before, yes, it is called unicorn spit, and what I like about it is how vibrant the colors are. You can dilute it as much as you want with water, but in my case, I'm not doing that. I'm just applying it with paper towels, and in the middle of that process, I got a nice visitor in the shop.
Yeah, what are those?
I'm working on a toy for Henry and you.
What one?
It's gonna be a toy from like the library. Remember with the hammer and you hit the pegs? It goes up and down?
Yeah.
I'm gonna make one for you.
Oh. It's probably almost finished. But it looks beautiful like this color.
Now that I know my colors are approved and beautiful, I can finish everything up and let them dry overnight before moving on to the varnish process. Because I want to use wood glue to secure the legs to the top after adding varnish, I do tape them off with painter's tape on the mortise and tenon joints just to make sure that that wood glue would adhere later on. And before I forget, we do need to glue our dowel into the hammerhead to complete our hammer. Now I want to point out that I am using spray lacquer to finish this because I'm just not concerned about my son putting it into his mouth, but I would advise that if you're going to sell these or give these away, you should use a food safe finish because inevitably they're going to end up in someone's mouth. Do as I say, not as I do. Anyway, with everything dry, we can now start the final assembly, starting with the levers and spacers in between the legs. The two smallest spacers go on each end, and the large spacers go in between each lever, capped off by each of the legs, which you don't even need glue for since they'll be held in place by the main top once you glue them into place. This is also a good time to check that everything moves freely and lines up correctly into the top. If that's off, then you might need to adjust your dowel length on the bottom. Mine looks good though, so I'm going to move on to inserting the pegs from the bottom of the main top, and then flipping everything over to assemble it after adding glue into my mortise joints. And once that's done, this is the final product. Pretty cool. Okay, well I guess that's all there is to say about this project. I think it came out really good, and like I said in the beginning, my son absolutely loves it, so that's all that really matters. I appreciate it if you stuck around this far into the video, and if you want to see more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.